I'm Elvis, but I don't want to hear no more about it from anybody. Amen? Amen. Is that all right with everybody?
Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, has left an indelible mark on the world of music and culture. His magnetic presence, powerful voice, and unique style made him a global icon. But over the years, rumors surrounding his personal life and his death have sparked intense speculation. One of the most enduring mysteries is whether Elvis truly passed away in 1977 or if he faked his own death to escape the pressures of fame. There have been countless theories, but one that has captivated fans and conspiracy enthusiasts alike is that Elvis might still be alive, living a quiet, humble life far away from the spotlight. Some believe that even in death, the king is still with us in one form or another. Did Elvis really disappear from public life, or is he hiding in plain sight? Keep watching, because what you're about to hear may just change everything you thought you knew about the legend of Elvis Presley. If Elvis was here, he would say, "Thank you so much for subscribing." As the rumors swirl, one name keeps popping up: Pastor Bob Joyce. He is a preacher living in a small town, but what makes him stand out is his uncanny resemblance to Elvis Presley. His face, his voice, even his movements, they all seem to echo the king himself. It's as if Elvis never truly left the stage. Instead, he just adopted a new persona, one that would allow him to live a quieter, more peaceful life. Pastor Bob Joyce has been a subject of intrigue for years, and many fans and conspiracy theorists believe that he might be Elvis in disguise. But what exactly is it that draws these comparisons? Could it be mere coincidence, or is there something more to this story? Let's take a closer look at Pastor Bob Joyce and the clues that have many wondering if Elvis is still with us. His features are strikingly similar to Elvis's: high cheekbones, sharp jawline, and famously arched eyebrows. But it's not just about appearance. Pastor Bob's actions, his voice, and even his love for gospel music seem to line up perfectly with the man who once ruled. When you look at Pastor Bob Joyce, you can't help but notice the striking similarities to Elvis Presley. Both men share a chiseled face, high cheekbones, and those signature arched eyebrows that became one of Elvis's most recognizable features. The resemblance is so strong that it feels almost intentional, like Elvis returned, but with just a few subtle changes. But it's not just about their facial features. Elvis and Pastor Bob are remarkably similar in stature as well. Both stand at 6 feet tall and share the same athletic build. They even have the same shoe size, an unusual size 11. These physical similarities are hard to ignore, and they've led many to wonder if Elvis faked his death and assumed a new identity as Pastor Bob. And it's not just the looks that tie them together, there are behaviors that are eerily familiar. Elvis had a quirky habit of scratching his left ear, and Pastor Bob does the exact same thing. This small personal action has become another piece of the puzzle for those who believe that Pastor Bob might be Elvis. It's these kinds of little details, almost imperceptible to the untrained eye, that suggest there's more to this story than meets the eye. It's not just Pastor Bob Joyce's physical appearance or habits that have intrigued people, it's also the way he moves. Fans have noticed that his gestures, especially when he speaks or raises his hands during a sermon, bear an uncanny resemblance to the stage presence of Elvis Presley. It's as if the king spirit never left, and now it lives on through Pastor Bob's mannerisms. Elvis was known for his captivating charisma, a magnetism that drew people in wherever he went. Pastor Bob shares this same charm. When he speaks to his congregation, his words resonate with warmth and authenticity. Whether he's singing a heartfelt gospel hymn or delivering a powerful sermon, there's a sense of familiarity that makes people feel like they've met someone they knew a long time ago, perhaps even a long-lost friend. Fans who've attended Pastor Bob's services often comment that his presence reminds them of Elvis, not just in how he looks or moves, but in the way he makes people feel. It's that same energy, that same connection to something greater than themselves. Whether Elvis intended it or not, Pastor Bob's demeanor, humor, and humility seem to echo the king's legacy. Elvis Presley's death in 1977 shocked the world, and for many fans it marked the end of an era. But what's strange is that for years after his reported passing, there were rumors of Elvis sightings at gas stations and restaurants and even at concerts. Some claim to have seen him walking through public places, his face hidden by a wig or sunglasses, but unmistakably Elvis. Could these sightings have been coincidental, or was there something more to them? This is where the timeline of Pastor Bob Joyce's rise to fame becomes significant. Pastor Bob began his ministry in the early 1980s, just a few short years after Elvis's death. Was this a strange coincidence? Many fans think not. The idea that Elvis could have faked his death and started over under a new name seems plausible when you consider the timing. After all, it would have given him the perfect opportunity to escape the spotlight, find peace, and reinvent himself away from the suffocating demands of fame. Pastor Bob's new life as a preacher is intriguing to those who believe in the theory. It's a life free of the public eye, a chance to live simply yet still connect with people in meaningful ways. His ministry focuses heavily on gospel music, something that Elvis had always loved and cherished. Could this be a subtle clue that the king of rock and roll chose this new life to reconnect with his faith and his passion for music, without the distractions of global superstardom? One of the most compelling reasons people believe Pastor Bob Joyce could be Elvis Presley is the voice. Pastor Bob's southern drawl, combined with the deep, soulful quality of his voice, is eerily reminiscent of the king's tone. When Pastor Bob speaks, there's a warmth and richness that stirs something familiar deep inside listeners, making them feel like they've heard that voice before. But it's not just his speaking voice. When Pastor Bob sings, especially during his gospel services, fans often say that it's like hearing Elvis sing again. The passion he pours into each song and the emotions he evokes from his congregation resemble the same intensity and soulfulness that made Elvis's performances unforgettable. For many, Pastor Bob's choice of gospel music further strengthens the connection. Elvis was known to have a deep love for gospel music, and throughout his career, he often returned to the genre for solace and spiritual renewal. Pastor Bob's ministry is rooted in gospel music, and he often sings songs that Elvis held dear. The performances are powerful, emotional, and full of the same spirit that Elvis infused into his own gospel albums. Could it be that Elvis, in his quest for peace, found a way to continue spreading his love for music through Pastor Bob's ministry? For fans who believe, it's as if Elvis's love for gospel music never died. It simply evolved, taking on a new form through Pastor Bob. It's not just the voice or the movements. Fans have also pointed out something else about Pastor Bob Joyce that strongly reminds them of Elvis Presley: his smile. Elvis's iconic grin, which featured a gap between his teeth, was one of his most recognizable features. Interestingly, Pastor Bob has a smile that bears a striking resemblance to that famous grin. In fact, it's even more intriguing because some people have noticed that Pastor Bob's smile seems to resemble the gap-toothed smile Elvis had before he had dental work done for his Hollywood image. For believers in the theory that Pastor Bob is really Elvis, this small detail is a crucial piece of evidence that ties the two together. It's as if the king's smile has remained a signature feature, even after all these years. In addition to the smile, there are other small, almost imperceptible details that continue to fuel the mystery. Fans have noticed how Pastor Bob holds himself, his posture, and the way he interacts with others. It all feels very familiar. Every gesture, every movement seems to echo the charisma and charm Elvis exuded on stage. For those who are deeply invested in the idea that Pastor Bob is Elvis, these signs feel intentional, as though they were left behind deliberately as clues to his true identity. Another striking aspect of Pastor Bob Joyce's ministry is the themes he often explores in his sermons. One of the central topics he emphasizes is redemption, an idea that resonates deeply with both his congregation and the broader audience who may be watching from afar. For many who follow Pastor Bob, the notion of redemption feels especially significant. Could it be that Elvis Presley, who lived a life under intense scrutiny, felt a need for personal redemption after years in the limelight? Throughout his career, Elvis struggled with the pressures of fame, addiction, and personal loss, and he was known to search for meaning through his faith. Elvis was often seen seeking solace in the church, especially in gospel music, where he found comfort in spiritual hymns. Pastor Bob's emphasis on redemption mirrors this journey that Elvis may have taken, a journey of spiritual awakening and a quest for inner peace. In Pastor Bob's sermons, there's often a focus on second chances, forgiveness, and the possibility of starting over. This message resonates with many who feel that Pastor Bob's teachings mirror Elvis's own struggles and desires for renewal. His audience, both in person and online, often feels like they're receiving guidance not only from a preacher, but from someone who understands the depths of human experience, the pain of falling short, and the hope that can be found through faith. For those who believe that Pastor Bob is indeed Elvis Presley, his teachings about redemption could be seen as a continuation of Elvis's own quest for healing. It's almost as if, after his death, Elvis has returned with a message of grace and renewal for the world. Beyond the music and sermons, Pastor Bob's impact on his community also plays a crucial role in the connection between him and Elvis Presley. One of the most striking aspects of Elvis's personality was his deep desire to give back to those around him, to connect with his fans in meaningful ways. Whether it was through charity work, spontaneous acts of kindness, or the attention he gave to his fans, Elvis left a lasting legacy of generosity and care. Similarly, Pastor Bob Joyce has built a reputation for his genuine care and attention to the people he serves. His congregation speaks of him as someone who listens with empathy, offers support when needed, and creates a space where individuals feel safe to explore their spirituality. This warm, nurturing quality reflects the same kindness that many close to Elvis knew and admired about him. For believers in the theory that Pastor Bob is Elvis, these actions go beyond being coincidental. They're viewed as an extension of Elvis's deep-rooted desire to serve others. Elvis's compassionate nature, which was often overshadowed by his fame, seems to live on through Pastor Bob's pastoral care. His ministry isn't just about preaching on Sundays, it's about making a real difference in the lives of his community, something Elvis would have taken great pride in. Pastor Bob's ability to connect with people, his willingness to offer counsel and support, and his gift for bringing people together show that if he is indeed Elvis Presley, his sense of service and humility remains unwavering. In this sense, Pastor Bob is more than just a preacher. He's a modern-day embodiment of Elvis's desire to touch lives and make a difference, a legacy that continues long after the King's death. While the idea of Pastor Bob Joyce being Elvis Presley continues to captivate many, there are just as many who view this theory with skepticism. For those who don't believe, the case for Pastor Bob being Elvis seems like an elaborate fantasy, a case of wishful thinking fueled by a sense of nostalgia for a legendary figure. There are several reasons why skeptics remain unconvinced, and understanding these perspectives is just as important in the investigation of this mystery. One of the most common arguments against the idea is the age difference. As mentioned, Elvis Presley was born in 1935, while Pastor Bob Joyce's birth year is reported as 1952, which is a significant 17-year gap. For many, this discrepancy in age alone is enough to dismiss the theory. How could someone possibly fake their death and then return 17 years later under a different name? The time difference is a key issue for those who view the idea as implausible. Additionally, skeptics point out the lack of concrete evidence to support the claim. Despite the similarities in appearance, voice, and mannerisms, there is no verifiable proof linking Pastor Bob to Elvis Presley. Official records, interviews, and other forms of documentation do not provide any substantial confirmation of the theory. For those who rely on hard facts, this lack of tangible evidence is a major obstacle. Another point of contention is the logistics of such a drastic life change. Even if Elvis did want to escape the pressures of fame, it would be incredibly difficult to simply vanish from public life in the way that some proponents of the theory suggest. The logistics of faking one's own death and starting over in a completely different identity would likely require careful planning, and many skeptics argue that the sheer difficulty of such an endeavor makes it highly unlikely. Despite these strong counterarguments, it's important to note that the mystery of Elvis Presley's death has always been shrouded in speculation. The unusual circumstances surrounding his funeral, the lack of detailed information about his final days, and the strange reports of sightings in the years following his passing have fueled a continued interest in the idea that Elvis may have faked his death. This has led some to question whether the mainstream narrative is really the whole story. However, for many skeptics, these theories are not enough to overcome the practical challenges and contradictions in the story. They argue that the parallels between Pastor Bob and Elvis Presley are simply coincidences. After all, people can resemble one another without being the same person, and habits like scratching one's left ear or singing gospel music are hardly unique to Elvis. According to skeptics, the connection between Pastor Bob and Elvis is a stretch, and they believe the theory is a fantasy created by fans who refuse to let go of the legacy of the King of Rock and Roll. Yet for believers, the connection between Pastor Bob and Elvis goes beyond mere coincidence. For them, the similarities are too significant to ignore, and the possibility of Elvis still being alive, living quietly as Pastor Bob, offers a sense of hope and wonder that no explanation can easily dismiss. Elvis Presley, for all his success, often struggled with the chaos of his fame. He found solace in gospel music, which provided him with a refuge from the constant demands of the spotlight. His love for gospel was a constant throughout his career, often singing religious songs during concerts or in private. It was this genre, deeply personal to him, that seemed to provide the strength and comfort he needed when everything around him felt overwhelming. To believers, Pastor Bob Joyce represents the fulfillment of a desire Elvis may have had for a simpler life. In stepping away from the limelight, it's as though he sought the peace he was never able to find amid the noise of fame. Pastor Bob's quiet life as a preacher, his devotion to gospel music, and his genuine connection to those around him fit into the narrative of a man who wanted to reconnect with what mattered most, his faith and his music, without the suffocating pressures of being the king of rock and roll. If Elvis really did fake his death and re-emerged as Pastor Bob, it would be the ultimate act of reinvention. It would symbolize the king's desire to start over, not as a famous icon, but as a humble man with a new purpose. Rather than entertaining millions with his voice, he could now inspire and heal in a more intimate, spiritual way. For many, this transformation is seen as not only possible, but as a natural evolution of Elvis Presley's life. He traded superstardom for spiritual peace, fame for faith, and music for a greater cause. The theory of Elvis finding peace in this new life as Pastor Bob is a hopeful one, suggesting that his legacy didn't end in tragedy, but instead continued in a way that brought him and those around him joy. For fans, it paints a picture of a man who sought refuge from the chaos, only to find a deeper connection with his faith, his music, and his purpose. No matter where you stand on the theory, there's no denying that the mystery of Elvis Presley's death and the potential connection to Pastor Bob Joyce adds an extra layer to the King's enduring legacy. Whether or not Elvis really faked his death and reinvented himself as Pastor Bob, the idea continues to intrigue fans around the world, keeping his spirit alive in a way that no impersonator ever could. Elvis Presley's influence on music, culture, and the world at large is undeniable. His impact is felt across generations, and his voice, charisma, and energy are still remembered today. But if the theory about Pastor Bob is true, it would mean that the legend of Elvis Presley never truly ended. Instead, it's taken on a new form, evolving into something quieter, more personal, and perhaps more profound. For believers, Pastor Bob is more than just a preacher in a small town. He represents a living, breathing connection to the past, a version of Elvis Presley who chose peace over fame, love over attention, and a life of faith over the flashing lights of stardom. It's a story that resonates with anyone who's ever felt the weight of the world and wanted to step away from it all, reconnecting with what truly matters. As the mystery continues, we are left with more questions than answers. Did Elvis Presley really choose a new life as Pastor Bob Joyce? Or is it all just an elaborate tale spun by those who can't bear to see the king of rock and roll fade into history? Regardless of the truth, the connection between the two men remains a powerful and captivating story that keeps the spirit of Elvis Presley alive. What do you think? Do you believe Pastor Bob is really Elvis in disguise? Or is this just a wild fantasy? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this deep dive into one of rock and roll's most enduring mysteries, don't forget to subscribe for more intriguing stories like this.